The town center was bustling to watch the hanging of the Thieves' Guild leader, the most entertainment this village had seen in a long time. However, there will be no execution today, as the rest of the guild has arrived to save their leader. The exiled knight approaches a fork in the trail. Will he ride south to create a new life, or north to claim vengeance and rid the world of the evil king? Welcome back to the Craft Lair. I am the Crafter. This is the Lair. I have an exciting 3-part build going on. We're going to be building roads and signposts in the first video. In the second video, we'll be doing some light up lanterns and bases for those using flickering LED tea lights. In the third video, we're going to be building a broken down wagon as well as a completed wagon that you can use for this entire road accessory kit. I'm going to be giving away these STL files for free, so be sure to check the links in the description. You can go ahead and give those a download and print those out yourself at home. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to be giving away STL files as often as possible, putting up build videos as often as possible. So stick around, hit that notification bell, and be alerted every time I post some new stuff. So here's an overview of the 3D models that we're going to be printing out. I've created a number of different names and things like that to place onto the signpost. I've created names that I've been using for my own campaign, but I've also included some blank ones as well if you didn't want to use those names. While those are printing, I'm going to build the bases for some of these roads. They're about 4 inches wide with a 3-inch road space. I printed out this cobblestone texture marker. It's really awesome. You can apply it directly to the foam, but I'm actually going to use some DAS air drying clay. I just folded that flat, trimmed it down to size, and this is a 3D printed texture roller. I'll be sure to link that in the description. And you can just roll that right onto the clay, and after a bit of trimming, it looks great. I've also 3D printed this grid stamp marker. This creates a 1-inch grid, so I just kind of stamp that down into the clay and shave down those edges to kind of bevel them out. I was having some problems with warping, so I decided to pin those down. Here I'm making some more roads. These are going to be our dusty trail roads, so these are a little bit smaller. They're not going to be cobblestone. I'm going to use some construction sand to create some gravel and rocks and things along these roads. I'm creating some curved roads, since these are dirt trails, they might not be quite as regular as a cobblestone road, so I wanted some of these roads to be a little bit oddly shaped. I created another section of straight roads as well. Now, with the tedious bits out of the way, we can get to beveling the edges of all these roads. Got a lot here. This is going to be a pretty big set when I'm done. I'm going back and forth on whether I want to use the grid stamp that I 3D printed. I built these so that these are all 2 inches wide, so they can fit 2 of these stamps. I just don't know if it's going to look good, if it's going to be worth it. I thought it'd be cool to use the clay, so I could put that down, I could stamp my grid into, and then cover that with some pebbly sand and get some really interesting kind of textures. So I'm beveling all these road pieces. I'm just cutting out some of this foam core along the edges to create some nice slopes so it'll kind of sit flush on the table. As you can see, I have a number of pieces here for the dirt roads. Be sure to properly dispose of your blades. Here I'm using some DAS clay and just kind of rolling that out flat and applying it to these and cutting out where necessary to create these kind of dirt pathways. Stamping in some grid stamps and just kind of smoothing those down. Using a Corona Refresca can, that's pretty much all this is good for, to roll with, and just kind of flattening that using my makeshift rolling pin. Again, continuing to stamp those and cleaning up the edges where possible. I had a feeling that I'd be using these roads a lot, so I wanted to make sure I had some kind of grid on these roads to make that easier. Here is our fork in the trail. It's a little awkward and some of them weren't perfectly sized, but for the most part the DAS sculpting clay fit. I'm using some construction sand here and just kind of smushing those down into the roads. Here we have some of our cobblestone roads that have been painted with a black Mod Podge. And I pinned those down to foam to help prevent warping. I don't think that step was actually really that necessary because these were able to kind of bend a little bit. Now I'm going ahead and doing that same process, creating some black Mod Podge using just some craft paint. giving that a liberal paint job. Painting over some of the little dots from where the pins were, as well as creating some bases now for the signpost. I'm going to need that signpost to stand up, and while I included a tiny little base in the 3D print, I wanted something that was larger and more secure that could blend into the scenery a little bit better. Okay, it's a bit later. I'm going to remove these roads now that they've all dried up. I'm also going to get prepared to make some like strips of static grass, so I can go ahead and apply these to the edges of the road. To do that, I'm using some parchment paper, some Eileen's tacky glue, and a static grass applicator. Now, Woodland Scenics makes one of these. It's called the Static King. It is about $80. It's pretty expensive, but it is fancier than this. I got this one off eBay for about $23, and it seems to work fine. I did a couple tests. I actually have not used any of the official Woodland Scenics static grass yet, but I'm going to try that out right now. How this works is you stick this end, this terminal end, into either the glue or even just near where you're going to be applying your static grass. It creates a static electricity field as this grass pours out of this strainer, and it makes it all kind of stand straight up. So just using the parchment paper and some tacky glue, it's easy to create these little strips of grass. This would have been okay. I actually really wasn't happy with how this turned out, but I'm showing the process anyways. I'm creating essentially like a little bit of a circuit using this glue and placing that electrode into it to create the static field. While this worked and it's a totally valid technique, I wasn't really happy with how well these sat on the road, so I didn't actually end up using these. Here we are assembling the 3D printed signpost. I'm using some baking soda to act as like a super glue accelerant, and I'm just kind of slapping these little road markers on there. And here are those little bases that I made using some foam core and some scrap XPS foam. I'm also using a little bit of drywall compound to kind of seal those in there. Here you can see I'm applying the black Mod Podge. You can also see some of the other hills and things that we'll be creating in video number 3 of this build. Giving everything a light coat of white spray paint as well as a coat of brown here. I'm going 2 ways with this. For the dirt roads, I'm using a dark black base, and for the cobblestone roads, I'm going with like a washed out summer kind of look, so I'm using a lighter color primer for that. Now making progress in airbrushing here, I'm using some Citadel air paint. I believe this is Terminatus Stone, and I'm just kind of blowing that in right around where the most foot traffic would be. I want this to be kind of like a dusty dirt trail, so just kind of highlighting the center of all of these. This is probably part of the most fun. And I did this step a few times. I'm using a light tan acrylic paint here and just really trying to make this look organic and realistic. So it's a little bit splotchy in some places, and that's okay because we're going to be adding some of the static grass, and this is really going to help. So here are the strips that I pre-made. They were difficult to stick down, and they left kind of like some ridges that were just visible. You could see the dried glue. So while I applied these strips to all of the dirt roads, I didn't apply any strips to the cobblestone roads that I had made, and I just applied the static grass directly to those cobblestone roads. And you'll see I'll go back and actually cover up some of the areas that weren't covered by these strips using just regular glue and applying the static grass directly to the roads themselves. So here I am doing just that. I wasn't really happy with the strips, so I'm just giving it more coverage, and this looked worlds better, and it was able to hide the seams. So I didn't remove any of the strips from these bases, but I just didn't use any more on the cobblestone roads. So again, using Arlene's tacky glue and just applying the static grass to those as best as possible. On some of these roads I wanted it to appear overgrown and such, so I applied some static grass in the middle of the roads. You can see on the right side of the screen where I had kind of followed some of these grid lines to look like maybe there's some weeds poking up out of the ground. And by tapping off the excess, you can see I'm nearly completed with these dirt pathways. I have decided that I don't really have a good place to store these, so I'm going to construct a little box using some foam core and place those in there. So I'm just quickly hot gluing together this little rack that I can put in a cardboard box, and all of these will be able to live in there without crushing each other. So it's kind of janky, but you know, it totally does the job, and I'm glad I built this. So I've coated my cobblestone roads in a white base coat, and I'm applying some brown paint to those as well. And then going back in with a gray over the main cobblestone roads, as well as some light brown in spots to give the illusion that some dust has been kicked up over these stones. The airbrushing was definitely probably some of the most fun for me. Here I'm going along the edges of the road and using a light tan color. Then to get a realistic cobblestone effect, I wanted some of these stones to be multicolored. So I'm going through with a little bit of blue mixed with some of that gray color and applying those. Here I am just going through with a light tan and applying those to some individual stones. And we also used a red and went around and dotted some stones with red. And those three colors, just kind of randomly spaced around, really sealed the effect that this was a cobblestone road. I'm using like a light straw. Originally I had primed the signposts white, but I really wasn't liking how that was turning out, so I reprimed them black. So I'm using some Vallejo earth pigments here. I'm using desert dust as well as the brown dirt, and affixing those using hairspray. It actually does a great job of making the pigments all stick together without losing that effect. I give everything a quick spritz of isopropyl alcohol, and then use some Woodland Scenic spray tack to secure all of the static grass down. Doing the same process for the signs here. And again, the same thing on the cobblestone roads, using some isopropyl alcohol to help this spray tack glue kind of soak into all the places. After that, I had used a little bit of ink and a quick dry brush of some light colors on the signposts to get those names to show up. Again, another coat of spray tack. The last thing to finish this up, I really like doing this, is using some rubber cement and black construction paper to kind of base these and have them have like a really nice professional bottom to it, as well as a quick coat of varnish on the bottom, just to ensure that the paper sticks and that if there's a little spill, nothing really happens there. So that about wraps up this build. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give the video a like, give the channel a subscribe. I'm going to be putting videos out there as often as possible, giving away STL files as often as possible. So your subscription really just gives me motivation to keep on going. Be sure to stick around for episode 2, where we are going to build some light up lanterns to go along with our roads. So I'm going to be 3D printing those out and giving away those STL files. Again, I am the Crafter, this is the Lair, and we'll see you in the next video.